Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's David and this is a brand new channel and I'm going to be sowing some seeds today, so I thought I'd show you how I go about it. I've decided to do this for beginners, so I'm going to do it in real basic layman's terms, but I love sowing seeds. Even now, considering how many times I've done it and how many seeds I've grown, I still get a real thrill out of seeing those seeds germinating and coming through the soil. Now, here in the UK, it's March, so it's perfect time to start growing seeds that you're going to be germinating indoors, in a heated environment or in a heated greenhouse. If you're wanting to sow seeds outdoors, then it's better to wait a little bit later just to make sure all the frost is gone. So, to get started, what you're going to be needing, if you're going to be following me through the process, is some form of tray or pot or plug trays. To be honest with you, you can actually use anything, any tray. You could use a margarine pot or an ice cream tub or anything like that, as long as it's got drainage holes in the bottom. So just puncture a load of holes in the bottom and happy days, you can use that to start growing some seeds. So you don't have to go out and buy some plastic pots or anything like that if you don't have them. It's all just about finding some sort of pot that you can use, but you've got to make sure that it allows the water to drain out the bottom. The biggest killer for seed sowing will be water. Now, as much as they need water to start germinating and to grow, if they sit in water, then the seeds will rot. And if the seeds rot, you've had it. They're just not going to germinate. So we've got a pot. The other thing that we're going to be needing is some sort of compost or soil. Now, I'm using multi-purpose compost mainly because it's what I've got, and it's the easiest one to get hold of and usually the cheapest. Now, there are specific seed sowing composts which are incredible, and if you can afford to buy them, definitely get them, especially if you're going to be growing loads and loads of seeds, because the content of them, they have a lot of sand in them, which means that they retain moisture, but they also let a lot of it go. It's also very, very fine. And it's very low in nutrients because the seeds actually are little energy packets. I like to think of them as little batteries almost. And the seedling will get all of the energy that it needs from the seed. So it doesn't really need to get any from the compost at this point, because we're going to be transplanting them on into better compost, more nutrient-rich compost at a later date. However, if you don't have seed sowing compost, or this is your first time of trying to grow some seeds, then multi-purpose compost is absolutely fine. Along with that, we're obviously going to be needing some seeds and something to label the seeds so that you know what they are, because I can guarantee if you're growing a number of different varieties, at some point you will forget which is which. And when they start germinating, they all look the same until their true leaves come through a little bit down the line. They all look very, very similar. So some sort of label. Now, I'm using these plastic labels, which are the sort of common plant labeling devices. However, you can use anything you can write on. My sister tends to use, the wooden lollipop sticks. She uses those and writes on those. So they work absolutely fine. It's just something that's going to remind you later down the line, in a week or two, when things start to germinate, exactly what they are. Now, the only other thing that I always recommend is a piece of tin foil. And I'll explain to you why later. So there are three things that I really want to cover today, which will make your seed sowing more successful. Firstly, the compost and how to prepare it correctly, the depth that you sow the seeds at, and how you water them. And if you follow these instructions, I guarantee you will be really successful with your seed sowing. It is worth noting though that not every seed is viable. So as much as you get seeds in a packet, even if you had perfect conditions, they're not all going to germinate. So don't feel like you've done something wrong or you failed or anything like that. It's not the case. Not all of them will germinate, but some of them will, which is why you always tend to over sow and sow a little bit more than you need, because it then gives you the options of getting rid of some of them, or if some don't germinate, you've still got loads and loads of backups. So let's get cracking. So the first thing that we need to do is prepare our compost. As I said, I've got here just bog standard multi-purpose compost. Now, The important thing when you're growing seeds is the texture of the compost. You want it to be as fine as it possibly can be. If you think about how fragile seedlings can be when they first shoot up, if you've got a big clod of soil in that pot, the seed just doesn't have the strength or the power to be able to push through and move past that clod. So quite often you'll find that the seeds will germinate, but because they can't get past all of the lumps above them, they won't actually poke their heads through. So what we need to do is to just run it all through your fingers and get it nice and fine. And if, like me, you find that in actual fact you've got little bits of bark and stick and all those sorts of things, try to get rid of those. So I'll just pop those to one side. And we're just going to keep working this until it's nice and fine. And then once we've got this to a really nice texture, then we can just fill up our pot, whatever it is that you're using. Okay, this is starting to look good now. Pretty happy with this. I've got a lot of the bits of wood out that just haven't decomposted, and we've got quite a nice fine tilth. That's you might hear people talking about a fine tilth, and it just means that it's all broken up into a nice fine powder. It's not you've not got any clods of soil or anything like that that's going to get in the way of the seedlings. So once we've got all of that worked, with a bit of wood, what we're going to do is take our pot, fill it with soil, make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to block anything. Right, perfect. Oh, another one there. I'm actually going to be sowing two different types of seeds here. Now the general methodology is the same, whether you're doing larger seeds or you're doing smaller seeds. But there's slight variations in the way that I do it. So I just want to talk you through and show you the two different ways that I do it depending on what type of seed you've got. So firstly, I filled a pot, and this is going to be called station sowing. This is for the bigger seeds. And then secondly, I'm going to be doing a bit more of a broadcast sow, so I'm going to be using a tray. Now, if you don't have trays, it's not a problem, just use a pot. If you use a slightly bigger pot, then it means that you can actually put a few more of the smaller seeds in there. So let's give this a quick fill, and then we can get on with actually doing the sowing, which is the fun bit. Right, so that's all good. Now, for the actual seeds, I'm going to be sowing sunflower seeds and evening primrose seeds. And the reason that I've chosen these is specifically because they're very, very different in sizes. And it'll show you the contrast of how I'm working with them and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So let me just show you. So we have here sunflower seeds, which you can see are actually relatively large seeds, about a centimetre or so. And then we've got these tiny little evening primrose seeds. They're about the same size as poppy seeds or grains of sand or something like that. And the way that they need to be treated is ever so slightly different, but I'm going to talk you through that right now. So the way I think about seeds are that they are little bundles of energy. They're little batteries. Single-use batteries would be the sort of best metaphor for them. And that seed contains all of the energy that's required to generate the seedling and the roots, and to push that seedling above soil level. Once the seedling is above soil level and it's got its leaves, it then relies on the sun through photosynthesis for all of its energy. So the seed has done its job. But if you've got a bigger seed, it's got more energy in it, and therefore it can be planted deeper. The official rule is, it's a bit of a mouthful, is that you plant it 3 times the depth of the height. And what that means is that if you've got a seed that's 1 centimetre, you plant it 3 centimetres deep. And if you follow this rule, you can guarantee that pretty much you're going to have great success with the seeds. If you have tiny little seeds like these evening primrose ones and you plant them really deep, there just isn't enough energy in those seeds to be able to push that seedling all the way up through the soil so that it can start to photosynthesize. And in actual fact, what's going to happen is you'll find that the majority of your seeds will fail. So, big seeds, sunflower seeds, get these planted. Okay, so when it comes to actually planting the seed, you can see here this sunflower seed, it's about the size of my little fingernail. So if I'm wanting to plant this 3 times the depth, I'm probably looking to just above the middle knuckle. So what I'm going to do is just using my finger, make a nice hole right in the middle, down to the depth that I want. Just make sure that's nice and deep. Get the seed and pop it in, and then we're just going to backfill that. So we just want to make sure there's lots of contact between the seed and the soil, so that when it's watered, the seed can soak up that water. Now, one thing that is worth noting on this, I don't know if you can see it very well, is that I haven't filled the pot right to the brim. And the reason for that is that if you fill the pot all the way to the top, when you water it, the water's just going to run straight off the top of the soil. It's not actually going to soak in as much. So you want to leave a little bit of a watering gap to make sure that when you water it, the water will sit in here up to the brim, and then it will slowly work its way through the soil, getting everything nice and wet. So let's go and give this a water. So, got my pot here, up by the hose pipe. I can give this a really good soak now. That'll do. And this is why the drainage holes in the bottom are so important, because you want it to be dripping out all of that excess water. And what will happen now is that'll carry on dripping out anything that's excess for the next 5 or 10 minutes. And as soon as it's finished dripping, you know that the soil has it's got as saturated as it can. It's holding as much moisture as it can, and it's expelled all of the excess water, and that's what we want, because we don't want it to drown. We just want it to be moist soil. So I'm going to leave this one here for the next 5 or 10 minutes, just until it stops dripping, and then we can take it back into the greenhouse. Now, I mentioned earlier that when you're sowing big seeds and when you're sowing smaller seeds, there are slight differences in the way you do it. In essence, it's exactly the same process, but with the seeds being so much smaller, they're going to have to sit much nearer the surface of the soil, of the pot. And because they're so small and so light, if you sow those seeds now onto dry soil and then water them, the weight of the water will actually push them all to the sides of the pot. And they'll germinate, don't get me wrong, but they will all come up around the side of the pot. Now, you wouldn't think that's too much of a problem, but when we try to transplant them, or pot them on, which is the proper term, in the next stage, what you'll find is that you're having to tease apart these tiny little baby roots of these tiny little baby seedlings, and in actual fact what you're going to do is damage a load of the seedlings, and you're just making a rod for your own back. So, get your tray or your pot or whatever it is you're going to be sowing your smaller seeds into, water it first. So I want that soil to be nice and moist, and again I'm going to leave this for 5 or 10 minutes, let all of the excess water drain off, so that I know I've just got damp soil. And so when I then sow the seeds on top, they're going to be in really close contact to moist soil, and they'll start to absorb that water, which will kickstart the germination. Okay, so I've had a cup of tea, and now that these have stopped dripping, we can actually move on to the next stage. So with the tray where I'm going to be sowing these really, really fine seeds, as I said, we've got damp compost, which has already drained all of its excess water. So it's just the soil that's moist, and that's what we need, because we're going to put the seeds on top, and being in close contact with that wet soil is going to allow them to start germinating. So let's crack on. So we've got our damp compost here in our tray. I'm going to put all of these tiny little seeds, make sure I get them all, and just going to very gently, just evenly as you can, considering how small they are, just allow these to fall across the top of the surface. Now, this is one of the reasons that I love growing things from seed. I think I paid £1.50 for a packet of seeds, and it had 250 seeds in. Whereas if you were to buy any of these plants fully formed or fully grown in the garden centre, you're going to be looking at £6, £7, £8 per plant. So if you've got a big garden, or you've got a small garden and you're just starting out, or you just want some colour, like annuals especially, this is a really, really good way of getting many plants relatively cheap. I think it was £1.50 for the packet. So fully recommend this. Growing seeds is also a really great way of getting kids involved in gardening, especially if you're growing fruit and veg. Like allowing them to see where their food comes from other than the shop is a really good idea. Now, one thing that I used to do with my family is that we would have sunflower growing contests. So we'd all get a sunflower from the same packet, and by the end of the summer we'd see who could grow the tallest one. It's just a bit of fun, but I know when I've done this with kids, they really enjoy getting their hands dirty in the soil and all that kind of stuff, and they get a real thrill out of seeing those seedlings first pop through the soil and sort of watching the process of them growing and then coming into flower, and there's an ownership to it. And so yeah, it's a really great way. It's a great thing to do with your kids if you're looking for ways to get them outside and away from their devices and all that kind of stuff. So once we've got our seeds all lying on top of the tray, what I'm going to do is take some more of my fine tilth compost and just do a very light dusting over the top. Only a couple of millimeters thick, and it's mainly just to stop the seeds from blowing away and moving or anything like that. It just gives a little bit of just something to keep them in place. So we've got nice little fine dusting on top there, and then to make sure that everything's in really close contact, I'm just going to take a pot and just press it down all the way along. I'm not pressing it hard, I'm firm but gentle. I think the consistency that you're looking for, I was always taught, is sort of a Victoria sponge cake. So we just want to get that all on there, nice and pressed in. And we're done. So now that we've got both of our pots prepared and ready, we've got our sunflower seed, it's been planted individually, singularly in the pot there, and we've given it a good water. And we've got our evening primrose that have been sown across the surface, just with a little dusting of compost on top, just to keep them in place and pressed down. The only thing that we need to do now is label them. So whatever method you're using as a label, or implement that you're using as a label, pop it in the pot, make sure you've got it written on there, and then that just needs to go somewhere warm and bright, kept moist, and that will germinate in anywhere between 1 and 3 weeks, and you'll see that starting to come through. Now, a little trick that I learned was tinfoil. If you get yourself a little square of tinfoil, if you're putting these pots on a windowsill indoors, as much as they're not dripping particularly anymore, like all the excess water is out, it's always still going to be a little bit of water that comes out. And the last thing you want is that water dirtying up your windowsills or wherever it is you're doing, wherever it is that you're putting them. So what I do is I get a piece of tinfoil, little square of tinfoil, under the pot, and then just scrunch it around the base, and that will capture any of the water that's going to drip out, and it's going to save your paint job or your tiles or whatever it is that's on your windowsill from getting stains from the dirty water that's coming out the bottom. Now that is how I sow seeds, and I've always been incredibly successful with them, and so it's the way that I would recommend to beginners to do it. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and let me know if you've tried it this way, or if you've got a way that works that's different to what I've done. I'm always learning. Nobody ever knows everything when it comes to gardening, so I'm always happy to learn new techniques and things like that. So if you've enjoyed this video, I am going to be doing a lot more gardening videos. I do apologise if the video shooting is a little bit dodgy. I will get better at it, I promise. It's just that this is my first one, and so I'm still learning how to get it all done. But if you've enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button. It means a lot to me. I'm trying to grow the channel. Hit the like button and the share button. And yeah, please leave down in the comments any questions or suggestions that you've got about how you do it. And I will see you in the next one. Always a pleasure, never a chore. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.